from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be here with you this Tuesday night. If you want to join us on our late-night national town hall conversation, give us a call. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And did Linda Sarsour and the AOC, all-out crazy left wing of the Democrat Party, win the battle but lose the war? Has the radical left wing won the battle and lost the war? That's my question, because I tend to think they did. Because I remember a time when Democrats were running away from their leftist friends and colleagues that were supportive of defund the police. Remember that? They didn't want to lose their races. They were distancing themselves. That wasn't that long ago. All of us are old enough to remember that. But Governor Tim Walz, he embraced that chaos in Minnesota. His first lady is on the record. You've probably seen it all over your social media, all over the news, probably on some other programs. Is there saying she left her window open so she could inhale the smell of the arson as they were burning and looting in Minnesota. I mean, how's that for weird? Unreal. I guess my question here is, what has Tim Walz done for you? What has Tim Walz done for America? What has he done for our kids' future? Now, look, I'm going to thank him for his service. I know that he was a command master sergeant and for a while operated as a sergeant major, but wasn't able to retire as a sergeant major. And his command master sergeant colleagues took exception at that, and they called him out for saying he was a sergeant major. But all that aside, what has Tim Walz done? Oh, yes. All right. Tampons in the boys' room. That was a big deal. He made Minnesota a sanctuary state for trans people and for those seeking radical gender-altering surgery and whatnot. Yep. Driver's licenses for illegal aliens. Yep. He signed that into law. What else did he do? Health care, free health care for illegal aliens. Reduced tuition for illegal aliens. Okay. I'm not here to rail against illegal aliens. They're, I'll say something controversial like Trump. They're great people on both sides, right? Many fine people on both sides. And I mean that. The issue here is that Tim Walz is a radical. And radical isn't really going to help. Today, Kamala Harris may have just added herself, Governor Tim Walz, who I like to call Walzy, to a growing list of left-wing Democrats like Jamal Bowman, who lost his primary, like Congresswoman Cori Bush from the Squad, who is right now looking like she's losing her primary, and i.e. losing her seat just like Bowman did. And all of that because they succumbed to the pressure of the radical left. In this instance, it's the radical left and their hatred of Jews. Now, you remember Jamal Bowman was railing against AIPAC and AIPAC this and AIPAC that, and AIPAC funded a candidate against him, and he won. Oh, guess what's happening to Cori Bush? It's happening again. So now, do you think that Kamala Harris would take a cue from this and say, you know what, maybe I'm going to go with Shapiro. Maybe I'm going to balance out this ticket. somebody East Coast, somebody West Coast, And again, she doesn't have to do that. I'm not saying she should have. I'm just saying, why didn't she? And it's clear why she didn't. She didn't because the Linda Sarsours and the AOCs of the left that like to apply pressure and say, if you don't do this, we're going to be whatever. If you don't do this, we're going to show up at the DNC and make hell. We're going to have those cowbells. We're going to bring Antifa. We're going to do what we do best. We're going to rip down the flag of the Democrat Party. We're going to put up a Palestinian flag. Right? We're going to come here and we're going to make a mess in your room. We're going to mess up your hair on prom night. That's what happened. They got bullied. And she caved. And this, I believe, is the issue, right? This, I believe, is what is not going to help her. I don't believe this guy is helpful at all. In my opinion, this guy is a cheap, chubby Joe Biden wannabe that's further to the left than even Joe Biden was. All because he, like Kamala Harris, subscribes to this radical progressive policy. And I believe this is not going to bode well for them. Just because it might be popular in Minnesota, and it might be popular in California, and it might be popular in New York and New Jersey, that doesn't mean that it's popular in the rest of the 45 states. It's not. Most of these people, look at Manchin, right? Manchin is a pretty sensible Democrat on a couple of issues. On many, he agrees with them. But even he couldn't survive. Does that mean that the electorate is changing? No. That means that these people are changing. They're becoming more radical, and they're pushing out the people that were once more moderate, if we could even use that word. And what ends up happening is those people, the voters that once supported these people, do you think that the voters of Joe Manchin, just as an example, do you think that they're going to end up with a Cori Bush, with a Kamala Harris, with Tim Walz? Or do they feel a little bit more comfortable with El Trumpito Donaldus Magnus, the 45th president of these United States? That's exactly what's going on. These guys are hurting their own chances. Kamala Harris can't be trusted to make decisions on her own. She made this decision, as Van Jones from CNN has aptly noted, because of pressure from the left. The anti-Semitic left within the Democrat Party had her by the cocktail onions, and she gave in. But I don't think it was a good move. And I think we're about to see the unfolding of that in the days to come, as their polls will likely change, and they're only going to be able to attack Trump. Attack Trump and promote the Green New Deal. Attack Trump and promote the confiscation of guns. Attack Trump and promote the destruction of the fossil fuel industry. The what else do they hate? Combustion engines. You name it. Gas stoves. They're coming for everything. And I don't think it's going to help. I really don't. If it did, I'd say, hey, they figured it out. But I think I was right. Not because I want to toot my own horn, but I really do think if they wanted to slam dunk this thing, she should have picked Gretchen Whitmer. She's another radical, but not as. I mean, she's more tyrannical, for sure, but not as radical as at least left-leaning radicalism. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I'll get to the Van Jones stuff a little later. There's other things I want to get into. The markets, have they cooled off? Is the meltdown over, or is it just a lull? And did the Treasury Department fudge the numbers, cook the books? Are they playing games? Looking at an article in Axios here from last night. Biden's Treasury is accused of trying to juice the U.S. economy before the election. Is that what's going on? If it is, that's not going to bode well for them either. Then we've got left-leaning candidates that don't match up with the Democrat electorate, and a Treasury Department creating a false-looking economy that doesn't match up with anybody's pocket. Come Election Day, the crows they come home to roost, right? I think that's how the saying goes, and it's not going to look good for them. Anyway, folks, we continue this conversation with a whole lot more. Welcome to the program. If you're just tuning in, I am Rich Valdez. The phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. If you want to weigh in, straight ahead, we're going to check in with one of my favorite economists, E.J. Antoni. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, thankfully, stocks rebounded today after a plunge to start the week yesterday. Major indices rose on Wall Street as calm returned to the market a day after its worst drop in nearly 2 years. They needed some calm. The S&P 500 rose about 1% today to break a brutal 3-day losing streak. The Dow Jones climbed 290 points today, and the NASDAQ added about 1% as well. Strong profit reports from Uber and other companies helped to support better vibes today among traders.
That's a report from WFAA. And are we in the clear? Is the meltdown over? Should we brace for further impact? I don't know the answers to all of that, but E.J. Antoni is going to help us make sense of it. He's an economist with the Heritage Foundation, and I'm still lobbying to make him the in-house economist here on America at Night. E.J. Antoni, welcome back.
Oh, Rich, you got to check my Twitter profile. It's been updated.
Oh, beautiful. We are in, folks. We are in. I love it. How are you, sir?
I am hanging in. As you were just describing, it has been a crazy few days, but we're surviving.
So let's talk about this, right? And again, you're talking to me. You know, I can look at political stuff and sometimes make sense of it, but everything else, I'm like, what? Who? What's going on here? And as far as I know it as a layman, these things happen, right, from time to time, especially when you have these governments, i.e. Biden administration, printing and printing and printing and spending and creating that type of problem, I think creates these types of bubbles. And there's other influences, but I think that's the catalyst for our economy, at least in this state. But we saw this craziness yesterday in Japan, and then we see it in the United States. And then today we're back up a couple of 100 points. Is everything hunky-dory? Are we back to normal? Should we expect more of it? What say you?
Well, Rich, I wish we could say everything was back to normal. I wish we were in the clear, but that's just really not what the data is pointing to at this point. And the big thing that's going on with Japan right now is essentially they have kept their interest rates so artificially low and for so long that it's created an arbitrage opportunity. In other words, people can borrow money at very low interest rates in Japan and then invest it here in the United States at slightly higher rates. So you basically use your proceeds from the investment in the United States to pay off the interest that you owe in Japan, and then you have a little bit left over. Now, it's not a lot, so you need to do this on a very large scale. This carry trade, as they call it, is about $20 trillion. So we're talking about a lot of money here moving around between the two countries. And that's basically all starting to blow up now as that rate differential goes away. In other words, as the interest rate in Japan rises, and it doesn't even have to rise that much. We're only talking about 0.25 percentage point, and it's blowing up the whole thing.
Now, tell us, is that the only thing that happened with Japan, or was there more?
That's the biggest thing going on. And the whole reason why they're having to push up interest rates is because the value of their currency at this point is basically just collapsing, because they've essentially done what we did here in terms of the government spending, borrowing, and printing too much money, but they've just done it a lot more, and they've been doing it a lot longer. And so the chickens are really coming home to roost there, and they're trying to pull out all the stops at this point to arrest the decline of their currency. It's almost a collapse at this point. If they allow it to go on, I mean, it's just going to deteriorate further and further. So they're trying to do exactly what the Federal Reserve has already done here with higher interest rates to try to bring down inflation. But the problem is it is essentially popping all of these asset bubbles in the process. And that's basically what the Fed has done here at home, where we had interest rates far too low for far too long. And it's not just a matter of it made it easy for the Treasury to borrow. It made it easy for everyone to borrow, including in the private sector. That's what helped push up home prices. That's what helped push up equities and other assets. So, again, we're facing a lot of bubbles right now, and it's always uncomfortable when they pop.
Yeah, for sure. Folks, we're on with E.J. Antoni. He's an economist with the Heritage Foundation and makes the difficult stuff easy to understand for guys like me. Now, E.J. Antoni, with this occurrence that we saw yesterday, should we expect to see more of that? Is it a sporadic thing, or do you think the worst of it has already happened?
It's definitely sporadic, Rich. Even if you're firmly established in a downward trend, you routinely will have days where you end up seeing these bumps where you might have the market be up 200, 300, even 400 or 500 points. But that tends to be because large financial institutions are essentially hedging their bets and covering different positions. In other words, you're not going to have a drastic sell-off day after day after day, but then you zoom out over the course of 3 or 4 months and you can say, wow, we were consistently heading downhill. It's a little bit of a sawtooth pattern, but it's definitely a downward trend. And unfortunately, I think we're definitely firmly in one of those trends right now.
Some of the listeners contact me on DM and on other social platforms, and they're convinced that when we see these things happening in other places, that it's the end of the dollar as we know it. Do you have that same sense?
I do, unfortunately. Now, obviously, it is possible to stop that total collapse, right? It's not foreordained. But the problem is the trajectory we are on right now. That's exactly the direction we are heading. You know, we have given a lot of countries around the world a lot of incentives to no longer use the dollar for foreign exchange and as a reserve currency. And consequently, they're abandoning the dollar slowly at first, but it's building steam. And as it does, those dollars have nowhere to go but back here in the United States to buy American goods and services, which means they're going to compete for the same things that you, I, and all the listeners are already buying. And that means more money chasing the same amount of goods, which means higher prices. So that is unfortunately going to be a large inflationary impulse in the economy in the years ahead. But again, it's not foreordained. It doesn't necessarily have to be this way. You can stop the decline, but it's going to be painful. It actually kind of nicely parallels what's going on with the stock market right now, where you can, if we have some corrective action, you're going to see some temporary declines, right? You'll see some big drops in the market, but it'll set us up for long-term healthy economic growth. Conversely, the Fed can jump in here right now and just start reinflating all these asset bubbles. That's going to stop the decline in terms of stocks, but it's going to put us right back on that inflationary roller coaster.
Makes sense. E.J. Antoni, a little bit of hope there, a little bit of hope. The dollar still survives, maybe till 1 a.m. Eastern time when we're off the air. I'm kidding. Folks, we're coming right back. E.J. Antoni is our guest. And when we come back, is the Biden Treasury Department fudging the numbers to make things look good? We'll find out from everyday Americans and E.J. Antoni straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations, Antoni. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
right. But you're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I personally feel like the economy is sucking right now. Less pay, more expenses, bills going up, rents going up, so it's pretty bad.
I work 3 jobs just to break even every month, and I have a master's degree from Columbia. the economy is pretty rough.
Everybody is concerned about the economic situation. I certainly am. I think the economy, in large part has done well.
Our current government has absolutely ruined everything. Can't afford life. I make 6 figures a year, live in the city, still can't afford life. Can't even afford to go out like we used to.
What do you see for the future?
Well, depending on how the election goes, I'm either hopeful or I'm moving to Ireland.
So that is a bunch of voters that Fox caught up with in Philly. And I thought it was interesting. You hear the nuance, you hear the difference, but they all said the same thing, right? Things are not great. Things are not fantastic. And it makes me wonder, how is it that our president, if you might remember him, Joel Baboso Biden, and his sidekick, Kamala Harris, who's now running for president with a guy named Walz, what is going on there? They keep saying things are fantastic, right? She says Bidenomics is working. But Americans don't seem to believe her. Anyway, I want to get to the bottom of this because, like I said, I was looking at this article in Axios, and its headline is Biden's Treasury accused of trying to juice U.S. economy pre-election. And I'm going to believe that because how many barrels of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve do you need to let go of to try and manipulate gas prices, and how much pressure can you put on Target and other large grocers and retailers to say, hey, make sure you're doing this and doing that. And every time there was the gas went up, it was, it's the gas station's fault, or it's this, or it's your cars too. You're using too much gasoline. All right, it was everybody's fault. It was Putin's fault. It was everybody's fault but Joe Biden's, but the spending. And I think people are just, they're not stupid. E.J. Antoni, listening to those people, what's your reaction to that?
Rich, I'm amazed because when I go back to my hometown of Philly and I talk to my friends and family there, I hear literally the exact same thing. They say the same thing, almost word for word. People just can't make ends meet today. I'm amazed at how many people I know have a second or even a third job, and yet they are still struggling. They still can't make it paycheck to paycheck. I mean, even some colleagues of mine who are just drowning in credit card debt, for example, because they're literally just struggling to afford necessities. They're not blowing all their income on yachts and caviar here, Rich. They're trying to buy milk and eggs and bread. It's the basics, and people can't even afford that. I mean, my goodness, it's like we're a third world country.
Yeah, this is where I think this is and you're an economist, not a politician per se, but this is where I think this election is truly about the economy, stupid, like the Raging Cajun James Carville said. It's truly about that. Forget all these other things and Kamala being Indian and being Jamaican and being this and being that. I think this is the whole conversation. People that do well are complaining. I know people who have 6-figure incomes that are complaining about what it's costing to fill their gas tank, that they're not eating enough steak like they used to, right? So if they're complaining, just imagine everybody else. And I'm wondering, other than, I don't know, Bill Gates and Zuckerberg, these people that can afford to take that hit, and there's plenty of them in this country, but they're not the majority. Is anybody doing well? Yeah. Is there any indicator that says, no, the economy's fantastic right now?
Rich, I think you're spot on here. Aside from those super wealthy folks, they're the only ones who really aren't feeling it. I mean, look, I talk to plenty of millionaires in the financial district of New York City regularly, and even they complain when they're going out to dinner at some very nice steakhouses downtown or Midtown Manhattan, and they're complaining about, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much this costs. Now they can afford it, right? They're not having to skip any meals, but it's even affecting their budgets. Right. I mean, that just gives you an idea of how everyone is being hit by this. Truly, the only people who aren't noticing it are exactly the folks you described, Rich, the ones who are so incredibly wealthy that they frankly don't even really know how much money they have in the first place. And I think, again, you're absolutely right. This election is turning out to be all about the economy. And we're kind of in a bit of a unique moment in modern political American history in that both of the candidates have records as executives. In other words, voters don't just have to guess what will they do based on their promises. they can actually look back and see, how did I personally do financially when this person was in charge versus the other person?
100%. And that's why I look at this article, and I've had it open since last night, because I think it's so interesting. With Axios saying that Biden's Treasury is accused of trying to juice the U.S. economy pre-election. I'm thinking, who are they juicing it for? And is it just for like the media, or is it just for those jobs reports that we talked about last time that are kind of continually adjusted, right? It's like, oh, we have these great jobs. Oh, we got to adjust them later on when nobody's looking. It's like the left admitting that, they made a mistake in an editorial. It happens after the fact and nobody pays attention. What is the accusation? Have you seen this article? Do you know what they're talking about here? Because they're saying it's, it's a Republican ploy that's not really happening. What's your thought on this?
Well, Rich, the Treasury is essentially manipulating debt markets right now in order to try to make it look like the situation with the federal debt is not as bad as it really is. But if you delve into the numbers, you get to see all the gory details, and you see just how bad it really is. We have to remember that every time the Treasury borrows $1, that's $1 that the private sector can't borrow, right? It can't be in both places at once. And if the Treasury is going to borrow money, let's say for a 30-year Treasury bond, that money is tied up for a very long time. And although that Treasury bond gets treated as a financial asset that's even tradable, it is not very liquid. In other words, they don't treat it like cash. But when you're talking about very short-term Treasury debt, so that would be a Treasury bill. The maximum maturity on that is a year. It can be only a few weeks, though. What happens is that parties will treat that like cash, and they will trade it like cash. And in that sense, the Treasury can still be borrowing money from the public, and yet it can get traded around as if that cash still exists. And so it essentially is a way for the Treasury to try to artificially keep down certain interest rates, and at the same time also try to keep enough money circulating in the private economy. It is not a long-term strategy. It's actually a very expensive strategy in the long term, but it does provide you a kind of temporary boost to liquidity and a temporary boost to markets. And it seems like that's part of the play in the election year, to kind of fool people into making them think that the economy is better than it really is.
Folks, we're on with economist E.J. Antoni. And, E.J. Antoni, part of what I think is happening here is what we talked about this, I don't know, maybe like 5 or 6 months ago. And you were explaining how it's no longer a good game to get into T-bills because of the interest. Now, interest has inflation has come down a little bit. Has it made it more attractive for the rest of the world to continue to buy the Treasury bonds, rather? Or is it still a losing proposition?
Well, what's making it more attractive right now, Rich, is a lot of these global recession fears. We're seeing so many economies, including ours here in the United States, slow down and pretty dramatically, that people are experiencing what we call a flight to safety. In other words, they're less and less sure about other economies and investing there. They're less and less sure even about stocks here in the United States. And so that money is leaving those different asset classes and it's going into treasuries. Well, if people are lining up at the Treasury Department to buy bonds, the Treasury doesn't need to offer as high of an interest rate because there are enough people there that some of them are going to be willing to accept a lower yield on their investment. And so that has recently helped to bring down those yields. But it's not because people think necessarily that the Treasury is a great investment. It's the cleanest dirty shirt in the laundry. That's all.
Right. Exactly. Folks, we're on with E.J. Antoni. And E.J. Antoni, I have to take a break now, but I have one question for you, and I'm going to squeeze this until they cut us off. The death of the dollar. Not that I'm looking for it. It's just that there are some people that are convinced it's happening. I tend to be on the fence thinking it'll happen one day, but maybe not soon. And there's more people rooting for the dollar than looking to destroy the dollar. That's my thought. You've said it's definitely something that could happen, but something that could also definitely be stopped. What needs to be done?
Well, I mean, Rich, right now, the reason the dollar is in as good a position as it is, despite all of the headwinds, is because it's a fiat currency, but it's kind of the gold standard of fiat currencies, if you will.
It's the cleanest dirty shirt.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically the tallest midget in the room, so to speak. So, I mean, what we're basically facing, though, is an increasing distrust of all fiat currencies everywhere, and that's going to take down all of them at some point. I mean, the real cure for this is what other fiat currencies have had to do in the past, which is to repeg your currency to a commodity like gold. In other words, return the dollar rather to gold convertibility, which, by the way, a president could do with the stroke of a pen with an executive action. Nixon undid it with an executive order. It could be redone. It could be repegged to gold with simply the stroke of a pen.
I think it's time. Folks, we're on with E.J. Antoni, economist at the Heritage Foundation. Make sure you check him out there. We're coming right back. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
You have experience and skills in interviewing, or you wouldn't be on your program.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
This was definitely a weaker than expected jobs report. We did add jobs last month, 114,000, but we were expecting to add 185,000. The unemployment rate ticked up from 4.1% to 4.3%. We saw jobs added again in a lot of the same industries that we talk about month after month: healthcare, construction, transportation, and warehousing. What we're seeing, though, is that red hot job market that had sustained this economy for so long is really dramatically cooling off. The pace of hiring has slowed down, and the number of people who are quitting their jobs has also been reduced greatly. You know, when people felt better about the economy and their own situation, they were quitting their jobs at a higher pace because they felt confident they could go out and get a better, maybe even higher paying job. We're starting to see that slow down now.
That is Alexis Christoforous at ABC News. And the jobs report, and again, these are the reports that are constantly released, and even if they miss the mark, they come back and adjust it down even further, a little bit straight ahead. That's what happens. Anyway, I want to get back to our guy, E.J. Antoni, who, A, I did not know was a Philly guy. I thought he was a D.C. guy. You know, I used to be on the air on WPHT, weekends for a few years. And B, what's up with this jobs report, E.J. Antoni?
Well, Rich, what we've essentially been seeing with the jobs report, and pretty consistently, is that the initial estimate is just wildly oversized. In other words, we have an initial estimate, it gets all the headlines, and then over the next couple of months, we find out that there are massive downward revisions. In other words, the job growth was nowhere near as good as we thought. But here's the problem, and if you kind of use this, it's taking it to an extreme, but I think it helps illustrate the point. Let's say you have a jobs report that says 100,000 jobs were added this month. And then next month, you get another report that says 100,000 jobs were added. Oh, but the last month, it turns out no jobs were added. Well, you do this month after month, and at the end of the year, the initial reports tell you that you added 1.2 million jobs, when in reality, you've added none because everyone was revised down by 100,000. So obviously it's not that extreme what's happening with the jobs report, but it illustrates the mechanism, right, how it happens. But the other really important thing is that, you know, not only are those reports getting revised down, but then we also have a quarterly census of jobs that the government does as well. And what that is finding is even worse inaccuracies. So, for example, in the last 3 months of the last quarter of 2023, it turns out the monthly jobs report, half of the jobs we thought we had there never even existed. So we were doubling the number of jobs that were actually being added to the economy. I mean, this is insane.
Yeah, it really is. Blows me away as I'm sitting there listening to you explain it. And it just, my thought on it is how does anybody get away with that? Like, you know, I couldn't say, oh, my gosh, my ratings are through the roof this month. Okay, sorry, folks. We actually had to adjust for those, and we found out they weren't through the roof. right? Or even you or anybody else. I don't know anybody who can get away with overselling in their job, under-delivering, and it seems to be okay. Do you?
No, not at all. Now, I will say, in defense of the pencil pushers and the bureaucrats here in D.C., as much as I can't believe I'm going to say anything in their defense, but here goes. They're dealing with a monthly survey of only about 119,000 companies. Now, that sounds like a lot, but it's nowhere near the quarterly census where you're dealing with 9.1 million establishments, right? I mean, it's a whole order of magnitude different, basically. So that's why that quarterly census is considered so much more accurate than those monthly jobs reports. But even still, we have a lot of statistical methodologies and different techniques to try to make this as accurate as possible. But the problem is when you get into times when the economy is moving very quickly, one direction or the other, up or down, a lot of the assumptions you made no longer hold true. So this was why, Rich, the last time we had jobs reports that were this inaccurate, it was during the Great Recession. It was in 2007, 8, and 9, because the economy was deteriorating so rapidly that the Bureau of Labor Statistics could not adjust their methods and methodology fast enough to keep up with how quickly, again, things were deteriorating. And that's why they constantly had to go back after the fact and adjust, of course, downward their jobs numbers. I think that's the same phenomenon we're experiencing today.
Spot on. Brilliant analysis. E.J. Antoni. Folks, I want you to give him a follow if you're on X, Twitter, whatever you like to call it. I still call it Twitter. I probably always will. It's at Real E.J. Antoni. And that's Antoni with an I at the end. Give him a follow. He's brilliant. He's always on TV. We're lucky to have him when he comes on the radio at night. Our economist in residence, our resident economist, E.J. Antoni from the Heritage Foundation. And is there anywhere else they should go check you out? Heritage.org, any other websites?
You can certainly find my profile, my work profile on heritage.org, but actually X is really the best place to follow me. I post all my daily analytics there as well as all the articles I write, so that's the best place to keep up to date on everything.
Absolutely. Definitely worth the follow, I can tell you, keeping you up to speed on a lot of stuff in the world of economics. E.J. Antoni, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Thanks for staying up late with us, brother.
Rich, it's very kind of you. Thank you for having me.
You bet. And folks, when we come back, we continue with your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. To the phones we go. We've got calls from Idaho, Pittsburgh, Bedford, Indiana, WBIW. Let's check in with Sarah. Sarah, go right ahead quickly.
Okay, concerning Kamala Harris's VP pick. On one hand, I think good, shot herself in the foot maybe, alienated some voters. But at the same time, it is worrisome that those handling her allowed her to go ahead with a more left-wing, more regionally centered candidate. It almost tells me that they have the confidence, that they have the support of an active part of the populace to win this election with that VP pick. And I think this will be a pivotal election. If she wins, we will see the clinching of tyranny, legalization of illegal immigrants voting, calls for gun control, adding to the Supreme Court. I believe she gets elected, all this will suddenly come into play. It's time to let the crazies come out of the closet in a way.
Yeah, outstanding analysis like always, Sarah. I appreciate it, and I think you're right. And I think mainly that she shot herself in the foot. I really do. Folks, we're coming right back. We're going to get to your calls in a little bit, plus some more conversation. Don't go anywhere. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. We're going to talk about Kamala's leftist decision and more. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Tuesday night edition of the program. We're live, we're national, and our phone number, if you want to join us, is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And there's a bunch of things I want to get into. Kamala Harris, of course, has chosen her vice presidential running mate. She's chosen the governor of Minnesota. His name, Tim Walz. That's W-A-L-Z. Not to be confused with a radio station, right? It sounds like a radio station, W-A-L-Z. Anyway, Tim Walz, and I haven't come up with a good nickname for him yet, so it will be Walzy for the time being. Kamala Harris and Walzy were on the campaign trail today. She introduced him at a stop in Philly. Listen to this.
Governor Tim Walz of the great state of Minnesota.
And as you see, the crowd is going wild. And, of course, the Pennsylvania governor was on hand to say how much he liked everybody and all these fun things that he was saying. He was the odds-on favorite early on, and then he wasn't. People think that's because of the anti-Semitism and this and that and pressure from the left. And I tend to agree with that. I think that's very likely what happened there. And this is the same Kamala Harris, right, that really just doesn't answer questions. So when she's asked if this is because of pressure from the left, she's not going to answer. It's kind of like talking to Merrick Garland. You're not going to get a straight answer for anything. But she was on The View, and not that long ago. And she says to Sarah Haynes, who asked her if the campaign should be pivoting on its messaging, specifically about topics such as the economy and the border. And you would think, what will you do about the economy, Madam who wants to be President Harris? And her answer, it's going to blow you away. Listen to this.
Voters want to hear about issues affecting their lives, like the economy and the border. Should the campaign be pivoting on its messaging?
So there's no doubt that one of the first issues that anyone will think of is the issue they think of when they're at their kitchen table trying to pay their bills, which is, how is the economy treating them? So there's no question whatsoever that that is an important issue, which we have been in the process of addressing. We still need to do more. I would not separate that from the issue of what is at stake in terms of hard democracy. And frankly, I think most people don't think of it in the context of democracy as much as freedom. The freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body. The freedom to love who you love openly and with pride. The freedom to be able to be free from gun violence. These are fundamental freedoms that are at stake right now. The freedom to have access to the ballot.
Okay, hold on a second. So we want to know what's going on with the border. We want to know what's going on with the economy. Can I pay my bills? And she says, absolutely, because this is very important, because this is about freedom. Freedom to have abortions. What? Freedom to love other men, or for women to love other women. What? And to be proud of it. No. I want the freedom to earn money and pay my bills, Madam who wants to be president. How does she miss that? Of course she didn't miss it. She thinks you're stupid. She thinks we're all stupid. This isn't going to work for her. You can't do that and get elected. You can't. That type of patronizing behavior, it just it doesn't work, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I sit here on November 6th and go, I got it all wrong. But I don't think I got this one wrong. This woman's buffoonish, right? This is buffoonery. Again, it's very reminiscent to Merrick Garland, who says, because he was once a federal judge, that his appeal to the recent victory that Trump had with Judge Aileen Cannon in a federal court, that this appeal has to continue because he was once a judge and he understands that this is a travesty of justice, in other words. Listen to this.
Judge Aileen Cannon ruled that the way the Justice Department has been picking special counsels for decades is illegal, unconstitutional. Why do you disagree with that?
Look, as you well know, I picked this room for this interview. This is my favorite room in the Justice Department. It's a law library. For more than 20 years, I was a federal judge. Do I look like somebody who would make that basic mistake about the law? I don't think so. Our position is that it's constitutional and valid. That's why we appealed. I will say that this is the same process of appointing special counsel as was followed in the previous administration and the special counsel Durham and special counsel Mueller in multiple special counsels over the decades going back to Watergate and the special prosecutor in that case. Till now, every single court, including the Supreme Court, that has considered the legality of a special counsel appointment has upheld it.
Hold on a second. You mean to tell me you believe every word you just said, Merrick Garland? Well, he's talking about special counsels going all the way back to Watergate. I want to bring in my own counsel for this. I'm bringing in a former assistant United States attorney from Northern California. He's the author of the book Postgate, How the Washington Post Betrayed Deep Throat, Covered Up Watergate, and Began Today's Partisan Advocacy Journalism. John O'Connor, welcome back, sir.
Hey, good to be with you, Rich.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here and agreeing to have this conversation. It's astonishing to me, the way that Biden is, not Biden, Merrick Garland, is so... in my opinion, he's wrong on a lot of things, but the way he tries to be as convincing as he can, I think he's just so full of it and disingenuous. But this is not a personal attack. This is really a debate on, I guess, the legality of it or the merits of the legal argument made by Ed Meese and Mark Levin and others that ultimately prevailed in this federal court with Judge Cannon. And now them coming back and saying this is not the case. And this is just... I think them having sour grapes over their lawfare not working. That's my opinion. What say you?
Well, first of all, one of the things you notice that Merrick Garland doesn't do is he doesn't give you the argument why it's okay. There's some very clear language that a second grader can understand. It's in the Constitution, and it says no officer of the United States shall take office unless he's A, appointed by the president, and then confirmed with the advice and consent of the Senate. It's like any other officer. Are you telling me that you can have an attorney general like Merrick Garland without confirmation? He went through confirmation. And we have also not confirmed Supreme Court justices. Can a president appoint a Supreme Court judge and say, oh, well, he's a special Supreme Court judge. He doesn't need confirmation. So what happens is he has never given us the reason, and the words are very plain. Now, let me tell you where he's off. He goes back and talks about other special counsels. I'll name some: Patrick Fitzgerald, John Durham. There's a guy named Hines from Utah. These people were all confirmed. They're U.S. attorneys who had been confirmed, but with the advice and consent of the Senate, and therefore they're completely legitimate. There was a time when we had a different statute, the independent counsel statute, which is a separate statutory scheme that's completely different. Now, I will say this one. There was one time, one fellow with a subpoena, all this wealth of authority he's saying he has, Rich. There was one fellow that contested a subpoena that Mueller sent him, and he appealed it to, guess what? The most partisan court around, the appellate court in the D.C. Circuit, and the D.C. Circuit said, no, Mueller's appointed, fine, forget it. He didn't take it to the Supreme Court. He didn't challenge it. But that doesn't mean that has the force of law. Other than in the D.C. Circuit, and and they're very, very liberal. But the fact is Garland never thought about it, and that's the thing. He now feels like he's got egg on his face because he was a federal judge and he didn't think about doing this. Now, he did not have to appoint a special counsel. In many cases, you have to appoint one because there's a conflict of interest, as in Watergate, where John Mitchell was under the spotlight and he had been attorney general. So there's sort of a conflict in that case. But the point is, he didn't even need to appoint a special counsel. He could have just gone ahead and prosecuted it himself through his own deputies or assistant U.S. or U.S. attorneys out there. He didn't do it because he wanted to fool the public into thinking that this was just a completely objective,
right.
Oh, I'm calling him as I see him. Oh, yeah, I'm independent, Merrick Garland. I'm clean as a whistle. Now, of course, we all know that Jack Smith was like an attack dog, and he wasn't in any way impartial. He was hired specifically because he was just going to go after Donald Trump with fangs bared. But Garland tried to fool us all into thinking this was just a clean as a whistle guy. Now, that's why he got caught. The one case where he had Trump in this crosshairs was that case. There are 8 charges, counts 33 to 41, where, and that might be 9, 33 to 41, where Trump is charged with lying and obstruction. Now, I got to say, I'm a former prosecutor. Those are pretty good charges. I have a lot to say. I think the Justice Department tried to entrap him on those, and they set him up for it. But nonetheless, he fell for the bait and, did some stuff. But the point is, he blew his only decent shot at Trump. This January 6th prosecution, and Judge Chutkan will rule the other way because she's a very partisan person, but that case, the January 6th case, is weak. It's sprawling. It's silly. It's got immunity issues, blah, 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 blah. That's a terrible case. Chutkan will rule the other way, and it'll go up to the Supreme Court. But this one in Mar-a-Lago, Garland made a bonehead play, didn't think about it. All he had to do was appoint somebody that was already a U.S. attorney, and this would have been fine. And you know why he didn't appoint somebody who was already a U.S. attorney?
Why is that?
Because that guy might actually be a good law enforcement officer and may look at this case and say,
get out of here.
Get out of here. Or here's what he would have done, and this is where Garland loved the idea of piling on the charges. They gave him 41 or 42 charges in Mar-a-Lago. All they needed was to charge him with the 8 or 9 counts, and he could have gotten a U.S. attorney. And I used to be a prosecutor. Those 8 or 9 counts are just fine. I would have prosecuted those. They're perfectly fine. But no, they had to charge him with 42. They had to have pictures of documents in the closets. That isn't mishandling of classified documents because you don't store them neatly. That's not what mishandling is. Mishandling is giving them to the Chinese or waving them around. I mean, he didn't mishandle them in the classic sense, like Hillary Clinton did, by the way.
Yeah.
But the point is that it really is. It's almost like a Shakespearean tragedy where Garland's pride and guilt are getting the better of him. The reason he gave this stuff to Jack Smith to appear on the up and up was because he knows that Biden was yelling and screaming to get these prosecutions going. It was leaked. Even the legacy press leaked the fact that Biden was throwing tantrums about not prosecuting Trump. But Garland knew he was doing this on a very partisan way, and he was cooking things up. The White House cooked this up with the archives. The archives got together with the White House, and they sent a referral letter to the FBI that didn't actually refer a crime. It just talked about how classified documents, gee whiz, at Trump's Mar-a-Lago were touching unclassified documents. Isn't that shocking? And so, therefore, they opened a criminal case. Now, why would you open a criminal case? Only because you want to trap Trump. Because if you open a civil case and then somebody doesn't respond to a subpoena, I mean, welcome to my world. I mean, every time you're in litigation, as any lawyer who's listening to this will tell you, people don't produce documents that they're told to, and then you've got to make a motion. Hey, Judge, Mr. Smith didn't give me the documents. Okay, naughty, naughty. The judge will say, I'm going to fine you $300. Give him the documents, Mr. Smith. That's what should have happened. But they wanted to trap Trump, so they opened a criminal case. Now, if you don't give documents in a criminal case to a criminal subpoena, you've now obstructed justice. So
John
they were
O'Connor,
trying to trap Trump, and he fell into it.
I want you to stand by right there. We're going to take a quick pause. We're coming right back. Folks, we're on with John O'Connor, former federal prosecutor, author of Postgate, How the Washington Post Betrayed Deep Throat, Covered Up Watergate, and Began Today's Partisan Advocacy Journalism. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue our conversation with John O'Connor, former federal prosecutor and the author of the book, Postgate. Now, I want to wrap up what he was saying and also learn a little bit more about the book, which we've talked about the book before, but I want to give you a reminder. John O'Connor, welcome back. So we left off with Merrick Garland doing all of this just to continue the lawfare against President Trump.
Right. And he is, remember when he was sold to us as a Supreme Court nominee or potential Supreme Court nominee, and boy, this is a guy who just was right down the middle. He wasn't a partisan. Well, he's shown us that he was a naked partisan, and that's really the game that the left plays. They're doing it now with Walz and Harris. By the time this campaign is over, you're getting people saying from the legacy press, oh, boy, these people are just really very moderate and right down the middle just because they're against border walls and they're in for defunding the police in 547 riots and giving cash and giving bail to people who destroy things. Other than that, they're just fine.
Yeah.
So that's, and Merrick Garland, is of that same ilk. He's a fake down the middle moderate. He's not. He's a naked partisan, and he's showing that, and he's doing Biden's bidding, and all the sources, even from the legacy media, they just didn't yell and scream it. Were that Biden wanted to go get Trump. Now, when they published that, they thought that was really cool that he wanted to get Trump. But the fact is that the president is supposed to be independent from the decision making of the Justice Department. This is clearly not true here. The White House had the National Archives, the group that's within the White House send the letter that came from Biden, and then Garland's actions were at the behest of Biden. So there's no independence here at all. And they're trying to sell independence by saying, okay, we'll make it look independent with Jack Smith. Well, guess what? It just shows their guilt showed up. It's Shakespearean, and they got caught.
Now, John O'Connor, if people want to, and I think you're right, by the way, and I think ultimately all of this unravels, and it's not going to be as profitable as they endeavored. And perhaps that's why they picked Jack Smith, somebody who's never really had any cases stick, right? He's just good at getting them to look good for a little while. But presuming that all of that happens, I think there's a vindication for Trump at the end of the road. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. Now this case in Mar-a-Lago is going bye-bye. They're never going to have a January 6th trial. And the only reason they wanted to do it was to get him blasted but before the election, and that's not going to happen. The only thing they've got is this one case in New York, and my prediction is this Judge Merchan will probably try to put him in an orange jumpsuit in September. That's going to be the next shoe to drop for this ridiculous case. Then he's going to have to run, his lawyer's going to have to run to the Court of Appeals to get a stay.
John O'Connor, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I want to thank you for being with us. Folks, grab a copy or two of the book, Postgate by John O'Connor. I want to thank you for being here. Hope you'll come back soon.
Rich, good talking to you, bud. See you.
Likewise. God bless. All right, America, we continue with our journey across America, your phone calls and more. Plus, why did she cave to the left? Because she's a leftist. Don't go anywhere.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, for the trust you put in me, but maybe more so, thank you for bringing back the joy. I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you and Doug, this incredible journey.
All right, America, welcome back, amigos, and we continue our conversation on Governor Tim Walz. Now, why exactly did Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, pick Governor Tim Walz? when he doesn't really bring a lot to the table. Well, some would say it's because of his Midwestern values, right? You have Congresswoman Elise Slotkin saying that on MSNBC today. Check this out.
I like that he has a military background. I like that he's a Midwesterner, especially. And I think that, particularly in contrast to the Republican candidates, the Republican VP candidate, who's also a Midwesterner, Tim Walz seems like he really embodies Midwestern values.
All right. So he's a Michigander and from Minnesota. Interesting. Anyway. But I think there's more to it than Midwestern values, right? I think actually Van Jones from CNN accurately hits the nail on the head here. Listen to this one.
But here's the challenge you've got in this party. And people don't want to talk about it. We got to talk about it. On the one hand, you have a lot of young people who are concerned about Gaza. You have a lot of Muslims and Arabs and others. They have not felt seen by the Biden administration. You start hearing that genocide joke. That was building. And so those folks needed to have a candidate that they could feel comfortable with. This helps them in that regard. But you also have anti-Semitism that has gotten marbled into this party. You can be for the Palestinians without being an anti-Jewish bigot, but there are some anti-Jewish bigots out there. And there's some disquiet now, and there has to be. How much of what just happened is caving into some of these darker parts in the party? So that's going to have to get worked out. It's going to have to get talked through.
So Van Jones, I think, hits the nail on the head here, saying there is an element of anti-Semitism within the radical left wing of the Democrat Party and within the media, and they're actively lobbying to get their way. And I think it wasn't that hard to twist Kamala Harris's arm and get their way with her. Those are my thoughts that Linda Sarsour, AOC, Ilhan Omar, and so many others really put the pressure on. But I could be wrong. And I want to get a better understanding of this from our guest, Preya Samsundar. She is communications director for K2 and Company. Preya, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Rich.
My pleasure. So I want to get your take on this because obviously this is the big story today. Tim Walz, not remarkably impressive from my perspective, but perhaps you have a different perspective. What do you think?
So, I think right off the bat, I'll say that Tim Walz is a snake oil salesman, to put it politely. I think he puts up a very good front as this Midwest dad who can tell bad dad jokes, put on his buffalo plaid, travel up north to northern Minnesota and pretend to be one of the fellas. Spent most of his life down in southern Minnesota, so can talk the rural ag game. But, when he's in St. Paul, when he's in Washington, D.C. as a former congressman, he votes with the left of the left. He is a far left congressman. I think in some respects, to what we've seen when we talk about the evolution that is Tim Walz, we see a guy who is trying to make it up the political ladder, right? He's trying to be the top of the game. And so when he was in Congress representing the 1st Congressional District, he was heavily conservative. This was a man who was endorsed by the NRA. There is an ad floating out there from 2008 from the Walz campaign, back when he was campaigning for Congress, where he's actually saying, I'm an NRA-endorsed candidate, and it has a voiceover of one of the NRA leaders talking about how proud they are of Tim Walz being a pro-gun Democrat. Fast forward, 10, 12 years, we have a very different Tim Walz, one who is welcoming illegal immigrants into Minnesota, championing this open borders agenda that we've seen from the Biden-Harris administration over the last 4 years, and he's giving them free driver's license. I think when it comes down to it, I absolutely agree with you and Van Jones that Tim Walz was kind of this secondary choice. I think if it was any other year and we were in a different environment, Josh Shapiro should have been the vice president candidate. He comes from Pennsylvania, which is a a battleground state, a state of importance. Obviously, this was a state that flipped in 2016 to give President Trump his first term in office. It is a state that will need to be closely watched, especially with those blue-collar workers. And Josh Shapiro does a very good job, whether you like him or don't, of keeping those relationships close. But the fact that they have run Shapiro through the mud to the point where they're even having this man apologize for having an Israeli-themed bar mitzvah at 13 years old tells us exactly what we're dealing with the Democrat Party today. And so I think, to your point, when Kamala is looking at what is the global scenario right now? What are we dealing with? Obviously, Hezbollah is attacking Israel once again in the north. We're continuing to see fighting in Gaza. We're continuing to see Hamas gain ground and continue its ongoing onslaught against Israel. That is going to continue to fan the flames here in the United States among those pro-Palestine and pro-Hamas protesters within that wing of the Democrat Party who are constantly clamoring for their way or the highway. And so I think for the sake of Kamala not losing 20% of the vote in states like Michigan and Minnesota and other places around the country, they had to make a decision. Whether or not that benefits them in the long run will yet to be seen. But to your point, Tim Walz is exactly like Kamala and doesn't really bring anything additional to the table.
Outstanding analysis. I want to continue to pull on that thread with you. Stick with me. Folks, we're on with Preya Samsundar. She's communications director for K2 and Company. And that's not the K2 that Joe Exotic was talking about last night. That's that stuff they're smoking in jail. This is a prestigious PR firm, and you can check them out at k2andcompany.com. Folks, we're coming right back with Preya Samsundar. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
There's more news in your commentary, in your analysis, than there is on the news network.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Tim Walz is wonderful, and she had many good choices among the six and certainly among the two. I'm a big fan of Governor Shapiro. Tim Walz, I know very well. He served in the House. To characterize him as left is so unreal. It's just not what the question. He's right down the middle. He's a Heartland of America Democrat.
Heartland of America Democrat, run of the mill, not a crazy socialist, right? Well, listen to Tim Walz. Check this out.
But we can get out there, reach out, make the case. And for one thing, don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. Just do the damn work.
One person's Tim Walz is another person's pendejo. Anyway, I want to continue this conversation on his American values, his socialist American values, with our guest, Preya Samsundar. She is a communications director for K2 and Company. Preya, you hear Nancy Pelosi singing his praises. You hear him saying, don't shy away from your progressive and socialist values. Does that sound like a moderate candidate to you?
Not at all. But Tim Walz has never been a moderate. Back to my point a little bit earlier is that, Tim Walz is kind of like a chameleon. He'll adapt to whatever scenario best fits him. I mean, let's look at some of the things that he's done just as governor over the last 4 years. I mean, this is a man, again, who has openly embraced the Biden-Harris open borders policy. I mean, he's out here offering Minnesota's taxpayer dollars for illegal immigrants to have health care, college tuitions, free driver's license. I mean, he's basically setting up camp for them to come here to Minnesota. We're talking about him repeatedly calling for universal health care. At the beginning of this past session, he was even talking about potential legislation for assisted suicide. This is not a run-of-the-mill heartland Democrat that we're talking about. These aren't the blue dog Democrats of old. This isn't even a Joe Manchin. This is so far to the left. An individual who gets along great with Ilhan Omar and Keith Ellison, but he really is the Kamala Harris of the Midwest. I mean, we as Minnesotans joke all the time that Tim Walz's goal is to make Minnesota the new California. And he's done it. I mean, in just 4 months, he raised our spending, our state spending, by 40%. They squandered a $19 billion surplus on just randomness. They're offering universal school lunches for all kids. It doesn't matter if you are the grandchildren of Glenn Taylor, the owner of the Timberwolves, or if you are the daughter of a single mom working 3 jobs, you're all getting free lunch. It doesn't matter. This is a man who is so inept at running our state. There are multiple cases of fraud that we are dealing with right now. One of the biggest COVID fraud cases happened right here in Minnesota. It's called Feeding Our Future. They stole $250 million from the state of Minnesota during COVID to buy Mercedes. They bought homes and mansions overseas in Africa. They even took some of that money to try and bribe a juror to get some of their folks out of jail, and to get the court ruling thrown out. I mean, this is what we're dealing with here. I mean, even in the last 2 years, we've seen Walz. He's had a trifecta, so he controls both the House and the Senate. They were trying to ban gas stoves and lawnmowers, gas-powered lawnmowers. These aren't things that you are seeing from a heartland Democrat. These aren't things that you are seeing from folks who embody Midwest values. These are the type of policies that you've seen Kamala Harris champion 15 years ago. These are the type of policies that Gavin Newsom wishes he could get by with, but can't because the folks in his state call him out. Folks in Minnesota do not call him out on it. And we're already seeing that the national media is already fawning over him for that, to Nancy Pelosi's point, those Midwest chops that he has going on, the bad dad jokes. But when you look beyond the surface, you find a radical and extreme agenda that would turn our country upside down and inside out and would progressively make things worse.
Really well put. Preya Samsundar, Communications Director for K2 and Company in Minnesota. And you're on the ground there. You know what's going on. I feel like Minnesota is kind of victim to what the Democrats do in a lot of big states that are kind of red-leaning states, like California once was, and New York and New Jersey. We have all these, outside of a couple of large urban centers, the rest of the state is either moderate or conservative, but there's so many people concentrated into the couple of large cities that it can swing the vote in that direction, making it, quote-unquote, a blue state. President Trump won, I think, I don't know, something like 80% or 70-something percent of the counties. How many counties do you have? 87? Is that right?
We have 87, so I believe he won
78?
78 of the 87.
All right, that's a lot. That's a lot. So when you look at an average like that, it makes me think that Minnesota is not that different from New Jersey or even more like a New York, where the majority of the people there are one way, and then you have these blue urban centers that kind of swing everything in the other direction. Is that what happens? Is that how this guy Walz is able to exist?
Absolutely. If you were to take out the 2 counties, Hennepin and Ramsey, so those are the homes of Minneapolis and St. Paul, if you were to take those counties off the map, Republicans would win Minnesota by 7 points. When you drop those counties back in, Republicans lose by 7 points, as we saw with President Trump in 2020. The reality is, a part of it is just, to your point, it is a heavy urban center. We're seeing that the suburbs are starting to turn a little bit more blue as folks from the inner city start moving outward. But also, I think a part of it, too, is, and I'm sorry to say this, but a part of it is our party and the inability to compete within these areas. The fact of the matter is we have steadily lost ground in the suburban areas, since about 2012. We've obviously gained a ton of ground up on the Iron Range and in northeastern Minnesota. So we see that Arrowhead. We have gained a lot of ground with blue-collar workers over there. We kicked Colin Peterson out, replaced him with Michelle Fischbach in 2020. Obviously, we took over Walz's former district, the 1st congressional district as well, which had a lot of blue-collar workers, farmers. Yeah. We haven't done a lot to compete in these suburban areas. And I think a part of it is that our system is kind of different from everyone else's, is because we go by an endorsement process here in the state of Minnesota where we allow a handful of people to choose who our candidate is going to be. So
sounds like an Iowa caucus almost. Preya, I want you to hang on for a second because I'm really interested in this, getting this little inside baseball from you live from the ground in Minnesota. But we have to take a pause right here. We're coming right back with Preya Samsundar.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, we continue our conversation with Preya Samsundar, comms director at K2 and Company in Minnesota. And she was explaining to us the similarities to their selection process in Minnesota, similar to the Iowa caucuses, where it's kind of an appointment process, right, Preya?
Absolutely. I think the major difference is, I actually worked for President Trump in Iowa during the 2020 presidential cycle. And what we see with the Iowa caucus is an electorate that understands that their responsibility is to choose a candidate who is well abled to compete on a national scale and has the ability to win over voters across different ideologies, across different states, regions, perspectives, and can talk about the issues in a very intelligent manner. Unfortunately, in Minnesota, we do have a small group of individuals who choose our candidates, but instead of looking at it from the perspective of who can best win our state and compete with Democrats head-to-head, we have a purity test where they make a decision based on who agrees with me 100% of the time. And oftentimes that means that they are not capable of competing at a high level or engaging with voters across different ideologies and pulling voters who either might be soft Democrats who are upset with Joe Biden or independents who are on the fence about which way to go. And so that has kind of left a pocket for us.
Preya Samsundar, comms director for K2. Let everybody know how they can find you.
Absolutely. Check us out at k2andcompany.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at PSAMSUNDAR.
Outstanding. Definitely having you back. It sounds like you got the ground game covered in Minnesota. Preya, thanks for being here. Folks, we continue with your calls and more. Open Phone America. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Tuesday night edition of the program. We're live, we're national. I'm broadcasting from the New York area, and if you're listening anywhere across the country, I welcome you to call the show right now. 833-4825-337, 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number. And as you guys know, the third hour of the show is a time-honored tradition where we call it Open Phone America. And Open Phones Across America is, again, a tradition here where you guys get to dictate what's going on, right? You pick the topic. You can say, hey, you know, here's what I heard. This is what I want to say. I don't like you. You're funny. You smell funny. You look funny. And you dress funny. Whatever the case is, right? You guys get to decide what we're talking about. And, of course, you know, I'll throw some stuff out here, too. And we've already talked about so much, and we'll recap some of that. Obviously, having some really good conversation on Merrick Garland with John O'Connor, some excellent analysis from E.J. Antoni, our resident economist, explaining the death of the dollar is not imminent, but it is probable. And, of course, this most recent conversation that we had with Preya from Minnesota. And the big story today is Mike Walz. No, not Mike Walz. He's a Republican, right? Tim Walz. And Tim Walz is governor of Minnesota. And he is, by most accounts, an unimpressive, cheap, chubby Joe Biden wannabe. That's a lot further to the left than Joe El Baboso Biden. And I don't know the reason they picked him. I think it's just because they didn't want somebody who was pro-Israel that they were getting in Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania. So that's my thought on that. I don't think it's because of anything other than that. I really think that was where the pressure came from. And that's where they are. But I do think this is going to backfire. I don't think this is a good move. I don't think ultimately everybody, starts flocking to these candidates. Now, I will say, I think that you have an electorate in America that's fairly split down the middle, right? So if you put no-name Republican versus no-name Democrat, I think you're going to get a close to 50-50 split. Maybe it's 55-45, maybe it's 51-49, but you're always going to get this split. And I would say it's typically going to favor the Democrats. It's my belief. I don't know if I'm right or wrong on that, but that's what I feel. And in this situation, it's not that different. I don't think Mr. Walz wins the race for Kamala Harris, and I don't think Kamala Harris wins the race for herself. I think a more authentic approach for her would be to just be herself and not obfuscate, but that's what she does, right? She likes to beat around the bush, like she did in that clip I played. I'll play it again just for the context so you know exactly what I'm talking about. She's on The View. They ask her about the economy, and her answer to the economy is abortion. Listen to this.
Voters want to hear about issues affecting their lives, like the economy and the border. Should the campaign be pivoting on its messaging?
So there's no doubt that one of the first issues that anyone will think of is the issue they think of when they're at their kitchen table trying to pay their bills, which is how is the economy treating them? So there's no question whatsoever that that is an important issue, which we have been in the process of addressing, and we still need to do more. I would not separate that from the issue of what is at stake in terms of hard democracy. And frankly, I think most people don't think of it in the context of democracy as much as freedom. The freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body. The freedom to love who you love openly and with pride. The freedom to be able to be free from gun violence. These are fundamental freedoms that are at stake right now. The freedom to have access to the ballot.
All right, hold on. So she said, I would not separate that from freedom. What? We're talking about people not being able to pay their bills, people not being able to afford to go out and have a steak dinner, have a lobster dinner, not even at Red Lobster, where it's more affordable. And they have great breadsticks, by the way. But I don't understand how she makes this correlation and then gets into abortion, then gets into, the LGBTQ love is love. I mean, absolute insanity. That's crazy to me. I don't have to explain that one. That one's pretty self-explanatory. This woman's off her rocker. Anyway, I want to get your thoughts and opinions on this stuff. Plus, I'm going to share a little bit about my day. I got a flat tire today. And I was telling Count Delacula, he is our producer in the control room. I was telling Count Delacula that my car tells me that I have low tire pressure in my front driver's side tire. And I go and I put air, and it seems to go away. And then the next day, which is today, that was yesterday, today, again, it's saying it's low, really low. It tells you how low it is even. And I'm putting more air, and I go to the mechanic because I happened to be there for my kid's car. And he says, oh, you got almost 40 pounds of pressure in this wheel. And I was like, oh, really? It's only supposed to be 35. I thought I was not putting enough. He's like, no, you got too much. I'll let some out for you. And then it felt a little smoother. And I was like, okay, good. That's what I like. And then I pulled over. I made a phone call. I'm in the shoulder on the highway. I had to make a pretty important call. I make my call. And then I get back on the road. And I'm like, man, I feel like I'm sliding. I feel like I'm on a bumpy road. Like, what is going on? And as my brain is processing, there's something wrong with your car, sir. Like, you ran over a cone. Like, something is weird. Car's behind me is honking at me. He's pointing at my wheel. So I'm like, let me pull over. I look. I don't even have a wheel anymore. I mean, the rim is there, but the tire's shredded. It looked like a rim wrapped in black rubber bands. It was just shredded. I had no idea. I couldn't even feel it. That's how smooth the ride is. But anyway, my point is, I'm not happy at this point, right? I'm like, it wasn't even the tire that the car was telling me was low on air. It was a tire that was perfectly fine. The one that's low on air is still fine. So I think I got a twofer here. I got two things. I got one sensor that's not reading right, and the other tire that's flat. So I'm going to get that resolved. I just want to say that was very, very annoying. Thanks for putting up with that story, America. I needed to get that off my chest. And let's go to Canton, Ohio. Check in with Debbie. Debbie wants to talk about Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Go right ahead.
Yes, and I'm not the hurricane, Debbie. That's kind of weird.
Taking Florida by storm.
That name. Yeah, you don't hear that name much anymore, but I heard it so much this week, Debbie. Well, what I want to say is I'm a grandma. I'm in my late 60s. Oh, yeah, of 6 wonderful. And I got another one coming.
Nice. Good for you.
We all feel, my children and I, here's the way we feel about things when it comes to Kamala and the election. We will eat taters every day, just taters to live, get our freedom. And that's the way we feel. We don't want Trump in. We don't believe in him. We want him out. We'll just eat a tater every day and get by. So we can live without him. That's the way we feel. So that's it.
So you're rooting for Kamala?
Well, I'm rooting for freedom. Thank you. And I love her pick. I love her pick.
So you love Tim Walz?
With Tim. Yeah.
Well, what do you like about
him? I love him. I love everything he's done. I like what he's done for Minnesota. I wish, first of all, we're not too far behind him here in Ohio, but we got some work to do. But I think he's done wonderful.
Well, let's
Minnesota.
start with the first thing that you like. What do you like that he's done with Minnesota?
First of all, women's freedom of choice for their own bodies. That's great.
Did they not have that before?
For me. Well, he's made it possible for them. That there's no doubt now. So
was there doubt before?
Feeding kids.
Well,
every
hold on
day.
a second. Was there doubt before? Because I live in New Jersey. I grew up in New York. In New Jersey, and again, I only know the rules around here. A woman can get an abortion in the 9th month of pregnancy. So there's no issue with getting an abortion here. Was that a problem where you were?
Well, Well, I grew up in a time when I actually had an abortion.
Well, we're not talking about when you grew up. He's only been governor for a few years.
I think every woman should have that choice.
But that's not the question, Debbie. I'm not asking.
Well, they're trying to take it
you're
away.
saying he did something so that women could have abortions, and I'm saying they've always been able to have abortions.
What do you mean always?
Meaning, in the years that he was governor, he didn't make it somehow magically legal. It was already legal.
Okay, well, good.
So
but
what else did he do in Minnesota that you like?
Every grade school kid gets lunch and breakfast, regardless of their income. I think that's very cool and important. All kids need to eat, and they don't need to be ashamed about the fact that maybe their kids or their parents don't make money. All kids have that right to be fed. That is cool. I like all that. I just like him all the way. And he's a football coach. I come from Canton, Ohio. Football is king here. I love that.
What is it that you don't like about Trump?
He's gross. He's weird. How about that?
Have you ever liked a Republican?
Yes, I actually did. My family was Republican. I voted Republican for the most
Mitt
of
Romney?
my early years. Yeah. Well, no, getting about that time, I was busy, didn't have time. But I'm just saying, I was Republican, raised and born. But even my mother at 80-some years old, and she's always been, she will never vote for Trump. She said that at 80-some years. Oh, he's got to go. She will vote Republican, but not with him as the headstone of the Republican Party. It's got to be somebody else. He's gross. He's weird. He don't
what
even
makes
talk
Trump
right.
weird?
Everything, the way he talks, the way he expresses himself. He don't talk like most of us.
He's from New York.
Crazy.
So I guess maybe most New Yorkers are weird.
He's not relatable in our family and the way we look at it. And we're Christian,
Sure.
and he's fake on his Christian. Oh, he's Christian. Oh, he's fake. We can tell it because we're real Christians. You can tell a fake one from a real one.
You,
so
during the Trump years, the economy is on record of being better in those 3.5 years than it has been since. Did you notice that, or was that something that you didn't notice in Ohio?
Well, yes, it's noticeable, but like I said, freedom is more important to me, and I'll eat a potato once a day.
Well, before you eat the tater, I'm just curious to know, what freedom would you lose, or did you lose, when Trump was president?
Well, he's backing all kinds of things like gay rights. I feel that's important. I want my daughter, my granddaughter at 20 years old recently came out that she is gay or lesbian or whatever.
Right, but Trump is like super gay rights.
She's beautiful and smart and wonderful. And I don't
you
want
told me about her last
to
time.
suffer.
But I'm just saying, Trump is really big on gay rights.
Oh yeah. Well, I haven't heard it. Haven't heard from him. Not
You
from
haven't?
his party. I haven't heard. No, I don't feel confident. in what he says. I haven't heard anything that convinces me that she's going to be protected, and also women's
what would
rights
happen
are not
to
gonna-
her?
I don't feel confident. Well, she could lose all kinds of rights. Like maybe she
How?
would lose a job because she gets at a job and they find out that she's gay, and then they'll fire her. You know, that kind of stuff. Like everything that's
But
been
there's
going
laws
on
against
in all
that.
the years past.
Have you ever heard of that happening in the 4 years that he was president? That gays were losing their jobs?
Well, first of all, no, but it's like the way he talks about people and the way he puts them down, and he his verbalization about things. It kind of tells you where he's leaning. So I don't want him
all
there.
I can say is, look, Trump had the very first gay cabinet person, Rick Grinnell, That was Trump that did that. He's so forward when it comes to his support for LGBTQ that a lot of other conservative Republicans take exception to it. But yeah, I think that's the wrong critique for Trump. I mean, of course, you're entitled to your opinion, but I'd encourage you to listen to more of what he says on those issues. I think you might be listening to people talk about Trump rather than actually listening to Trump. And if you did, you might have a different opinion of him. Debbie, I got to stop here because I have to take a commercial. Thank you for the call. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you. Godspeed to you and your family. Folks, we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And this portion of the program is brought to you by Trumpalax. Trumpalax is for Trump derangement syndrome, also known as TDS. You dissolve one tablet in your mouth each time you experience stress or anxiety from Trump derangement syndrome. If you experience a sour taste, continue using this until you experience a sweet taste, the sweet taste of conservatism. Avoid situations and conversations involving the wall, the economy, fake news, Republicans, and Republican policies, as well as Russia, Fox News, impeachment, and global warming. This is a gag that somebody gave me once. They gave me a box of these. And they're little pill bottles, and they look like real pill bottles. And it's extra strength Trumpalax, and it's to solve a problem called Trump derangement syndrome, TDS. I made a video about it years ago when I got it, and it's like these I don't know what those sweet and sour candies are called, like Jawbreaker type of things. Anyway, I thought it was funny. Maybe I'll make another video so you can see what I'm talking about. But I think you'll probably Google it, Trumpalax. Very funny. You can give them to your friends. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you. A lot of great calls here. We got calls from Florida, calls from Minnesota, Oregon in the building. We're going to do all these calls right now, so stand by. Don't go anywhere. Let's start with, who do we got here? Monica, calling from Pendleton, Oregon, KUMA. Go right ahead, Monica.
Hi, Rich. How are you doing this evening?
Wonderful, thank you.
Oh, my word. I'm telling you what, that clip that you played on the show while I was cooking my daughter her late evening dinner with Kamala Harris.
Oh, you mean the one where they asked her about the economy and she answered, well, the answer is abortion. And the answer is everything but the answer on the economy. You mean that one?
Precisely.
Monica.
My goodness, sir.
Isn't that crazy?
I want to slam my head against the wall. I can't believe I heard that.
Don't throw your head against the wall. I want you to hang on. We're going to finish our conversation on the other side of the break. And we're also going to get to calls from Sarasota, Florida, from Minnesota, from Montauk, New York, from St. Augustine, Florida, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Boise, Idaho, and, of course, we're on right now in Oregon. So don't go anywhere, folks, and we're coming right back. The phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't move a muscle. It's Rich Valdez. We're coming right back.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
I think that you guys have got to do a better job at actually forcing Kamala Harris to answer questions. This is a person who's been the presumptive Democrat nominee for 16 days. She hasn't taken a single real question from a reporter. The American people deserve to get to know the people who want to lead them. And I think it's shameful for Kamala Harris, but increasingly for the media, that she's taking a basement strategy of running from reporters instead of getting in front of them, answering tough questions about her record, and letting the American people know who she is. President Trump and I take hostile questions. We take non-hostile questions. We get out there and talk to people because we respect the American people enough to want to persuade them and not to try to run from them. So I think you guys got to do a better job. That's my humble opinion.
That is Senator J.D. Vance, the vice presidential candidate nominated by President Trump, his running mate, saying that the media is not holding Kamala Harris to account to answer tough questions. And we were just talking about that with her answer on The View, and they said, what do you do about the economy? And she said, well, it's about freedom. It's about the freedom to have an abortion, about the freedom to be able to engage in LGBTQ love. And that might be nice and dandy for those that want to do that, but that doesn't do anything for the economy or the border, does it? Well, Monica from Pendleton, Oregon was on the line and listening on KUMA, and she was weighing in on that. What do you think of her answer, Monica?
Just absolutely deplorable. She doesn't even have an answer to the economy. I mean, seriously, what in the hell does, a woman's body, blah, 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 what's that have to do with the economy? Nothing, right? No, she totally dodged the question. She turned it around and made it into, like a emotional so-called blah, blah, blah freedom thing. No, it has nothing to do with it. Totally nothing.
Yep, good point. Thank you, Monica, for the call. I appreciate it. Big shout out to everybody listening in Oregon, West Coast in the building, KUMA, great station, by the way. And let us continue. We go to, where did I want to go here? Walter, St. Augustine, Florida, WFOY. Go right ahead, Walter.
Rich, remember the song Smiling Faces, Pretend to Be Your Friend?
I don't, but you do a good job with it.
Thank you. Anyway, I watched a bit of that masquerade today. Harris and her pretender kept laughing, outbursts of laughter and clapping, and brought out the word joy again and again. So you can see one of the agendas for them is everybody can put their heads in the sand and have joy, and as Harris's protege did, defend LGBTQ, while we all lose our country. Estados Unidos.
Yeah, Estados Unidos. You're right. And you know what's crazy about that is I saw that clip you're talking about, and I don't have it because it's just like weird sound, right? It's just clapping, and it's part of the cut we did play earlier. They're just laughing and clapping and laughing, and it's nice and it's joyous, and that's a moment for the media, right? It's like they're trying to create contrast so that when they say and Harris is thrilled with this guy and blah blah blah. And, and they want to create the contrast of Trump, who typically comes out and he does his little towel behind the neck dance. And he's very serious because he's usually coming out to like God Bless the USA or something like that, or 50 Cent's song. And he's a little bit more serious. And I think they're trying to create this contrast and appear more jovial. But I don't think it's genuine. I really don't. It doesn't come across as genuine to me. But again, I am a critic. And I am biased, but Walter, thank you for that. I do appreciate it. It really is a masquerade that we're watching. Big shout out, by the way, to everybody listening in St. Augustine, Florida, WFOY. Let us continue. Let us go now to Gia. Gia is calling from Sarasota, Florida, WENG. I love Florida. Florida is in the building. Gia, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Thank you, Rich. Thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so first of all, I had a comment about Debbie. Was that her name, Debbie? I'm surprised you didn't complain about the piano music that sounds like a kid's piano during the breaks. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Somebody yelled at me for that once. I do remember that. He's like, I hate your show. I was like, what don't you like? That damn piano.
Yeah. I reminded you of that in my last call. That's why I had to bring it up again. But,
yeah, that was really good.
Honest, that was crazy. So I got two things. One, I have a rebuttal to Debbie. Debbie, this isn't a personality contest. This is a fight for our freedom and to save our constitutional republic before it gets turned into a third world country. And you can't be a Christian and be pro-abortion. You just can't. It doesn't match. The Ten Commandments says, "Thou shalt not kill" or "Thou shalt not murder." Basically, is what that means. And abortion is the murder of an unborn child. And my other thing that I want, and so you can't be a Christian. You can't have it both ways, Debbie. The other thing too is, where's Joe? We just had a hurricane, Debbie, here in Sarasota. A lot of people lost their houses. their property. We got flooded and no natural disaster declaration for us. So all these people need help. So where's Joe? Is he sleeping or I mean, what?
Yeah, where is Joe El Baboso Biden? Well, first, I want to say, with respect to Debbie, I don't want to pile on Debbie because I think Debbie was really just speaking her truth in as much as she knows, right? And I'm glad that she's listening to the program and she's open to different ideas, and I encourage her to listen more and to call as often as she'd like, because these are, in reality, right? What you just said, I think, is her exact feeling, that she's also fighting for her country. She believes that Trump is a threat to the democracy. She believes that her grandchildren are going to lose rights because of their choices in life, and that Trump is some sort of monster dictator authoritarian that's going to take them away. Now, I could turn blue in the face trying to sell her that story. Clearly, somebody else has done a better job selling her the other story than I have. And this is why I try to always pause before I freak out and go, what are you, crazy? There's no, because I realize that this is their truth. And my hope is that cooler heads will prevail and that logic will prevail and that the truth will ultimately set us all free. But it's fascinating, right, to see a conversation like that unfold, where you think you look at things one way, I look at things one way, and then you talk to somebody else, a decent person by all accounts, in my opinion, and they see things completely different. And this is where when I say I believe the country's just divided, and it doesn't matter who runs for president, whether it's Trump or Harris, it doesn't matter. You're going to get a pretty even split down the middle, even if it's lower numbers. The turnout may not be as big if it were like a Trump. But the battle here is truly for the soft Democrat who hasn't really voted in the last few elections because they're not enthused by the candidates. The independent that's kind of like, look, I can vote. I have to work that day. I don't know if I'm going to go vote. This is really how the election is going to be won and lost. It's based on these people. And I don't think there's time now to persuade, right? I don't think we're going to get, whether it's Debbie or anybody else who is an anti-Trump person, to say, hey, consider Trump. I'm offer that as advice. But ultimately, I think that their minds are made up, and I will offer them whatever advice I can give them to try to correct the record as best as I can from my perspective. But ultimately, I think so many people have their minds made up already, and it's just a real testament to where we are as a country. Now, the second point that you made, I thought was really interesting. There's no disaster declaration. Kamala Harris is in Philly campaigning instead of being on the ground with the FEMA director saying, hey, how are you guys doing? The reason why? They don't have a shot in HELL of winning Florida, so they don't care. They don't care to court the vote in Florida. They might have cared in Miami-Dade at one point because they were like, oh, we could win this county. No, they didn't win it last time. So I think they've really written Florida off because of its red state status. At least that's my thought, Gia.
Yep, I agree, Rich. I agree. Can I tell you something real brief, too? Yeah. I'm older, too, like Debbie. I'll be 67 in a few months. And I never voted in my life until one day I met a person, a distinguished gentleman who was a retired CIA agent. And I didn't even bring up politics because I wasn't even into it back then. I didn't even really care. I was like, oh, everybody's lying.
Right.
I'm not voting. I'm not wasting my time.
Like so many people.
Right? But this
Crook A or Crook B.
Yeah, exactly. How can I determine which one's lying the least was my thought back then. But he brought up the topic when I first met him. I was working in a restaurant, and he came in there, and he was eating, and I saw his nice clothes and everything, and I was like, oh, can I ask what you do for a living? He says, well, actually, I'm a retired CIA agent. And I said, really? And then he took the conversation. I didn't say a word. He said, and let me tell you something. Obama had a fake birth certificate, and he pulls out his phone, and he shows me a picture on his phone of this birth certificate and how you can tell it's fake. Then he shows me the draft record, Rich, and all the names were typed in typing, and then Obama's was written in a pencil, in a pen on the bottom. And I said, well, I don't understand. I said, why didn't you guys do anything about it? And he says, well, that's not our job. That's the FBI's job. This happened in 2016.
I don't know. I mean, I would believe if that did happen, and I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm saying when things like that happen, it's because the CIA is involved, right? You don't get somebody who was born in Kenya and then fakes a U.S. birth without the CIA being involved in that. That's exactly what they do, right? They engineer campaigns and they swing elections in other countries, and they claim to never do it in the United States. And I don't know if I believe that. But Debbie, thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. That was an interesting story. Excuse me, Gia. All this talk about Debbie. And I think Debbie, too. She's terrific. Gia, Sarasota, Florida, WENG. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Hope you'll call back soon. I'm going to take a quick pause here, and then we're going to go to more calls in Minnesota, New York, Pennsylvania, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, Mr. Valdez, you have one of the greatest shows that radio's ever had.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez, and I'm with you live until 1 a.m. Eastern Time, midnight Central Time. And I guess that's, 9 p.m. Pacific Time. Anyway, you guys remember when Congresswoman Cori Bush was speaking with a reporter? We have this from our this file from the archive. Listen to this.
So you're saying that you're saying that they're paying their fair share is what you're saying?
No, I'm asking what percentage is a fair share.
Their fair share, the same.
They're discussing taxes, right? He's asking her what percentage is a fair share of taxes. Go ahead.
If I'm paying, if a third of my money is going to taxes, then I think a third of their money should be going to taxes. It does. Well, it does.
I'm trying to understand because you realize the effective tax rate on the poor is less than it is on the rich, right?
Okay, so first of all, I'm not the poor. I'm very close to that line, but I'm not the poor.
Okay, so the effective tax rate on the middle class is less than it is on the rich, correct?
It's great on radio. It's even better on the video. You have to see her face. She's literally making an argument for something that actually is. Kind of like what Kamala says, right? Unburdened by what has been. Anyway, that's Congresswoman Cori Bush, or I should say former Congresswoman, or soon-to-be former Congresswoman Cori Bush, because it is my distinct pleasure to say that the New York Times, Fox News, and CNN have all called this as a loss. Cori Bush has lost her seat in Congress. She lost to her opponent because of her radical, crazy ways. And we saw it with Jamal Bowman. We're seeing it with Cori Bush. We're going to see it with Tim Walz, and we're going to see it with Kamala Harris, how bad you are, how bad she is indeed. She's very bad. Anyway, let's get back to your calls. I want to go to Charles. Charles is calling us from Minnesota on KROC. Charles, what town are you in?
I'm in Zambroda.
Zambroda. It's my favorite part of Minnesota. Anyway, what's on your mind tonight? What do you want to say about Governor Walz?
Well, I don't remember if it was the first time he became governor or the second, but he was bragging about how much he was going to do for Minneapolis and St. Paul. And one of the reporters that was there went and asked him a question as to what he was going to do for rural Minnesota. And he went and said, "Why do I care about them? They're just rocks and cows."
Oh, wow. Well, that's the type of attitude. And I've never heard that clip, but that's the type of attitude that's going to get you in trouble unless you know you can count on the urban centers, right? Minneapolis, St. Paul, and wherever else there is a big urban population where there's people, right? And those people outnumber the people that are out in the sticks or the rocks and cows, like you say. And then voila, you're still able to win elections, even though the majority of the people in the majority of the state, 78 out of 87 counties, went with Trump. And that to me says that the state is a lot more red than it is blue. But it ends up being a blue state because of these large Democrat cities. And they know what they're doing. That's how they do it in Los Angeles. They do it in New Jersey. And they do it in Camden, Newark, a couple of other handful of big cities that lock everything down, Jersey City. And then that's it. Doesn't matter if you've got all of the Jersey Shore. It's like a big conservative Republican bastion for the most part. Maybe minus Asbury Park and a couple of others. But there's a lot of conservatives in New Jersey. But they get overshadowed by the vast multitude that are in the more densely populated areas. Charles in Zambroda, Minnesota, KROC. Thank you for your call, sir. Let us continue. We go now to Margaret. Margaret's calling us from Montauk, New York. What is that? WJJ. What station are you listening to, Margaret?
Believe it or not, Rich, I'm a seasonal here, and I don't know the station. I was just about to fall asleep. I guess, is it Debbie that I heard? And that woke me up.
She's terrific. She may not agree with me, but I think she's a really sweet woman.
You were very gracious to her, and you're really much more gracious than I was. And this is my message to her, and I hope she's listening, because I'm not as gracious as you are. She's dumb or ignorant. Take your pick. I don't care. But she doesn't. She's not familiar.
Sees things differently.
I'm sorry?
I think she just sees things differently.
That's why I'm saying you're very gracious, but I don't think she's familiar with the backgrounds of these politicians. I mean, I don't know if she's aware of the fact that Walz is allowing tampons in men's bathrooms.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of people Margaret, that celebrate that. And this is why I'm saying there's such a vast difference in worldview, right? I'm with you on a lot of this stuff. I think a lot of this stuff is crazy, but I get the opportunity through this platform to talk to people like that. And I realize these are very, normal people that have just drastically different views than I do. And based on things like their love of their grandchildren. And who can argue that? And this is what we're contending against. So if we are abrasive, and I'm not saying that you are, but I'm just saying if we are abrasive, which I can totally be, we the old saying, you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And I think that rings true for this scenario as well. And you're right. There's a lot that people don't know, especially when they've been misinformed by the media. Margaret, I wish I could stick around a little longer, but they're telling me I got to take a pause and then come back for the speed round. Thank you. Lovely to hear your voice. I hope you call back again, listening online, richvaldez.com. Margaret in Montauk, New York, which is gorgeous this time of year, by the way. Have a lobster roll for me, and please call in again. We'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, we're going to go to Eugene, Oregon, KGAL, Smart Talk 1580. Trump, what do you want to say about Trump? Kara, go right ahead.
Oh, hi. I wasn't saying about Trump. I had a little word. Thank you. Hi there. I had a little word of comfort for Miss Debbie. Trump actually has had an out gay man, I believe, in his cabinet, and has hired other gay people.
Yes. It had Rick Grinnell, Ambassador Rick Grinnell, and he also served as a national security advisor. Kara, thank you for the call. Paul, Bill, and Ulysses, I can't get you on tonight, but I'm going to send you a T-shirt. Give Christian your size and your address. God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.